If you've ever wondered why the Pultec EQ is legendary or how they work and what makes them different from other EQs, how about circuit topology, tube versus solid state versions? And what about the Pultec sound? What's really behind it? I'm going to answer these questions, including visuals and sound, and I'm going to do it as efficiently as possible so I don't waste your time and mine. So stick around. Hi everybody, I'm Todd, and I hope you're having a great day. I'm going to say that while there are others, the most famous version of the Pultec EQ is probably the eqp-kt. It's a passive equalizer. It first appeared in the mid-1950s, and it was designed by Eugene Schenk and Ollie Summerland. They're the founders of Pulse Techniques. Now, despite its simplicity, it really became a studio essential that's been used by top engineers to shape sound in a way that many say that other EQs just can't replicate. Unlike conventional parametric EQs, the Pultec works uniquely. It allows simultaneous boosting and cutting at the same frequency band, and this creates a resonant dip. This produces kind of a natural musical effect that many love for adding depth to mixes. Now, it's interesting to note that the original Pultec manual recommended against doing that. No boosting and cutting at the same frequencies. But you had to know engineers were going to break that rule, and this became that famous Pultec trick. And it helped really define the Pultec legacy. Now, I wonder if Eugene and Ollie knew the magic and said that just to make sure everyone did break the rule. Now, today, the circuit design is very well known, and it's accessible to users at all price points in both plug-in and hardware versions. Before I explain what's inside, here's a few examples. So you can see what a Pultec type EQ does. I've loaded up both a plug-in and hardware, so I have the Universal Audio eqp-1A plug-in and the Clark Technic eqp-kt hardware. Now, I've matched the curves here as close as I can, really. The orange line is the hardware, and the purple line here is the plug-in. Now, you see when I go ahead and boost the signal in the plug-in, you see this goes up, but the value also went down here. And, there's a lot of interaction between these two curves in particular, and that's really, the Pultec sound, if you will. That's kind of what it's famous for. Now, you'll see that the controls are completely different on here. You look at the back and forth, like the boosts are pretty close. I got this a little over 5 on the plug-in, a little over 6 or around 6 on the hardware, but the attenuation is completely different. Attenuation I've got sitting around 7 on the plug-in versus it's sitting, at around 3.5 on the hardware. And, depending again on where we want this to end up, fine-tuning can move that a bit, but you'll see there's variance. So this is why you can't just set the controls to the same number and think, oh, it's going to sound the same. And this would happen with multiple plugins, multiple hardware, even of the same brand in many cases, especially vintage hardware. And this is just the nature of it. So controls are one thing, but the curves actually show another story. Now, when you look at the harmonic analysis, again, starting here at 20, you can see we've got our harmonics that are happening all the way up across. And as I go ahead and move the slider, I'll just bring things up higher. You can see again that, we're getting different regions are going to have more or less in terms of a harmonic character associated with each of these units. And then when I go over to the oscilloscope, just to show you, again, things are lined up here, again, as close as I can get them. And, phase is going to be dependent on this plug-in doctor whenever I happen to select the oscilloscope, whether they line up perfectly or not. So we're not looking at phase, but we're just looking at really the amplitude of these curves here. And as you can see, there's a lot of similarity across between them. Not exact, and I don't expect them to be, but let's go ahead and listen to some audio.
Why is it so hard to just be honest? Why is it so hard to speak the truth? Why is it so hard to just be honest when I want this? Maybe you want it too, so I just need to tell you. I just need to tell you. I just need to tell you. I just need to tell you.
Now, for an example with a solid state EQ, I have the Lindell Audio PEX 500 VIN hardware, and then I have the Slate Digital SDPE1 that allows us to have either tube on or off, so in the solid state mode. Now, I have the frequency set up like this. I've got 60 hertz for the low frequency on both, and then I have 5 kilohertz for the mid frequency set up on the Slate, whereas I've got 10 over on the PEX, and I've got 30 on the Slate for the attenuation on the high, and again 10 on the PEX. And all that is to create this curve that looks about the same. And you'll also notice a difference here in terms of the boost and the cut in terms of how they're set. But of course, we're looking at the frequency. And again, just like with the tube EQ, you can't really just line up the knobs and hope for the best. You got to go by sound, go by ear. And so this is the linear analysis. If we look at harmonics, one thing you'll see is that the hardware, which is in orange, is producing harmonics all along the way. The plugin is not. If I turn the tube mode on, you'll see it adds all those harmonics in, but we're not emulating a tube. So, here's a difference already in the plugin. Then in terms of the oscilloscope, you see things line up pretty much the same. So let's go ahead and listen to some audio. Now for the solid state demo, we'll use bass. That's my favorite application for this type of Pultec. Again, I've got everything level matched here, but this time I'll also switch this tube mode off and on the slate just to give us those harmonics. So let's talk about what's inside a Pultec. It's built around a passive EQ section followed by a gain stage. Originally it used tubes like in the eqp-kt, but then solid state models came later on, like the eqp-kt3SS. That appeared in the 1970s. Now the passive section consists of capacitors, inductors, and resistors that shape the frequency response. Now the amplifier stage restores the gain lost in the EQ process. So think of those things as subtracting various frequencies throughout the range and then makeup gain being applied. Now the inductors and capacitors, they work together and they create those resonant peaks and valleys that allow for tonal shaping. Now this is why the Pultec EQ has such a smooth musical response compared to modern EQs that try to force things in both directions. Now the use of tube amplification in the eqp-kt up to and including modern recreations contributes to kind of its warm, harmonically rich sound, because tubes basically will introduce some subtle saturation, soften some transients, and maybe add some depth and character. But later on, solid-state versions from both Pulse Techniques and other manufacturers replaced the tube amplification with transistor-based circuits, like much tech of the day. They're often cleaner, more transparent signal path, and less harmonic coloration. Now, some engineers prefer that because it maintains accuracy without adding warmth of tube amplification. The choice, of course, between tube and solid-state Pultecs depends on the sonic result you're after. Need warmth and vintage character? Go for the tube version. Want a clean EQ shaping without saturation? A solid-state model might be the right fit. I often use tube-based Pultec EQs for general sculpting of classic music genres in particular, but solid-state is almost always my choice for bass guitar. So what do you think about Pultec EQs? Do you use them in your mixes, plugins, hardware? Let the community know in the comments below. As always, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time.